So yeah, my name is Austin Scipiora. I'm a research associate here at the Center for Urban Transportation Research, and it's my pleasure to serve as your moderator for today's webcast. I think this issue is particularly relevant. Women now comprise, about half of our U.S. labor force, and we're also seeing considerable growth in STEM occupations. So while we're seeing this industry growth, women are still less likely to go into STEM fields. We have about 4.6% of women working in STEM compared to 10.3% for men. And the segregation kind of continues to be a persistent feature of the U.S. labor force. And I do think it's important, to kind of understand how this impacts our sector and maybe identify and talk about some of the ways that the transportation industry can really address this issue. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and introduce our speaker today. So Jody Godfrey is a research associate at the Center for Urban Transportation Research at the University of South Florida, where she works on the transit safety and workforce development programs and mobility policy research. Jody received her bachelor's and master's degrees in civil engineering from USF. She's also a member of the TRB's Task Force on Transit Safety and Security, and a graduate of the Institute of Transportation Engineers, the ITE Leadership Program. Jody is also a member of the International ITE STEM Subcommittee and Women in ITE Task Force, and serves as the current treasurer for the ITE Tampa Bay chapter. And today she's going to be presenting on findings from her recent publication with the Mineta Transportation Institute on attracting and retaining women in the transportation industry. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Jody.
Thanks. Great. Thank you so much, Austin. It's a pleasure to be introduced by such an amazing colleague as Austin, so thank you. And I want to additionally, as Austin mentioned, thank the Mineta Institute for funding this project that is very near and dear to my heart. And additionally, I want to thank Dr. Robertini, who was my co-author on this project. And then finally, as I'm looking through the participant list here, I see many of the mentors and influential females throughout my life that I've been blessed to have. So thank you to all of you who are on the call as well. So getting right into it, this report was written for the Mineta Institute, Attracting and Retaining Women in the Transportation Industry. And this was really a compilation of annotated bibliography of all of the work that had been done in the past, really to highlight what has been done and to kind of try to focus on the gaps of where research could really help attract and retain more women in our industry. And the link there at the bottom of that slide, which should be clickable in your handout, will lead you directly to the full report. So an overview of kind of what I will be talking about today in the outline. First, I'm going to give you an introduction, as Austin first did, of kind of the state of the industry, and then I'll go over some of the objectives of this research. I'll highlight some of the findings, including the state of the practice, how to attract women to the transportation industry, and then how to promote and retain them once we do attract them. And then I will conclude with some findings and recommendations, and there should be plenty of time at the end for some follow-up questions and feedback, because I would love to hear from some of you if you have implemented any of these strategies that are recommended. So getting right into the data, the proportion of women that are age 16 and older in the U.S. workforce has grown steadily from 1950 at about 29.6% to 47.5% as of 2017. Meaning women are accounting for almost half of all jobs now. And this is according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. However, this growth and women's share of the labor force has not been homogeneous among occupations. So women only account for very small portions of many male-dominated industries, such as engineering, STEM, and transportation. Women typically account for the vast majority of occupations like preschool through middle school teachers, nurses, secretaries, administrative assistants, receptionists, and information clerks. While in general, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, men tend to account for larger shares of drivers, laborers, freight, stock and material movers, construction laborers, carpenters, automotive service technicians, mechanics, engineers, and other, as I said, STEM fields. So as we focus even more into just transportation, the proportion of women in transportation occupations is still really low. So as of 2005, the U.S. Census Bureau American Community Survey began tracking occupation by sex, at which time women accounted for 12% of transportation occupations. As of 2017, the women's share has increased to 14.6%, but still obviously less than that 15% mark, which is kind of concerning to a transportation professional like myself. So when I say transportation occupations, this is including transportation supervisors, material moving workers, aircraft and traffic control operations, motor vehicle operations, rail, water, and other transportation occupations. And so this is also inclusive of kind of transit operators and the such. And being full disclosure, I tend to focus a lot of my work in transit safety, and so a lot of this is not only transportation focused, but I tend to bring it back to transit and safety as I'm going through the research. And I would encourage all of you to bring all of these thoughts kind of back to how they're applicable to your type of transportation. So the objective of this research was to summarize previously conducted research. One main thing that we found was that communal goal congruity plays a big role in how someone chooses the career that they're going to pursue. And so this research really did highlight a lot of that communal goal congruity, and I'll get into some of the details of that as we move a little further into the presentation. I also wanted to identify additional research needed to attract, promote, and retain women in the industry, because while we are making improvements, there's definitely room for more improvement. And then the last objective there was to detail the major findings and subsequent recommendations. So this is really just taking what has worked in the industry, in the transportation industry so far, and highlighting it so that others can put it into practice. So moving into the state of the practice, while women participation in the workforce is increasing, it's increasing disproportionately. So the Federal Highway Administration Public Roads Magazine wrote an article in 2010 on women in transportation. And that article revealed that while the proportion of women in the workforce has consistently increased since the 1950s, women remain underrepresented in engineering and in the transportation industry. The article cited that just over 10% of all civil engineers were women. And in other transportation and material moving occupations, the percentage of full-time employed female workers was only 13%. And that's even though women made up almost 47% of the total labor force. So the article cited a lack of equity between sexes at the individual level, which contributes to unnecessary limitations on the talent pool and deprives the transportation field of a vital source of talent. And so in order to combat this issue, leaders in the profession were then interviewed, and it resulted in 5 different recommendations from this particular article. The first was to connect with children and young people through school programs and social media to promote science and engineering. And you'll see that this ends up being subsequently one of my recommendations towards the end as well. Second, they recommend that you build relationships through networking, which I found to be probably the most valuable part of professional development is networking. The third recommendation is to participate in industry organizations and take leadership positions. And I think that this is very, very well tied with networking. As you network, you get more involved in these outside organizations, and the leadership positions really do help to promote yourself. Um, and that will lead ultimately to you being a mentor to others, whether you wanted it or not. Um, the fourth recommendation that came from this particular article was that institutions would benefit from mentoring young professionals. And then finally, their last recommendation was to recognize that workers have lives outside of their jobs, and by ensuring flexibility in scheduling, facilitating telework, and avoiding the necessity for long work hours, that will definitely improve attraction and retention of women in the transportation industry. So unfortunately, attracting women to transportation is not just a national phenomenon here in the US. Um, I looked at some of the European Union statistics as well, and women account for only 17.5% of the workforce in the European Union's urban public transport. And women hold less than 10% of the technical and operational jobs in the European Union. So this is beyond a US issue. And then focusing education and training on the necessary skill sets required to be successful in the transportation industry will undoubtedly ensure that the best qualified candidates are prepared to enter the transportation sector. And so I will pause here for a moment to just mention that while this is focused on attracting and retaining women in general, I find that many of these practices will attract and retain the best talent and not just women. So you'll find that you will attract more qualified people by following many of these suggestions that will come. So many occupations, excuse me, such as lawyers, physicians, and mail carriers, which have traditionally been male-dominated, have improved at attracting women by transforming their perception from that non-traditional woman job. So the Women's Bureau defines a non-traditional occupation as one where less than 25% of the workforce is women. And so the transportation industry definitely falls into that category. So I'm sure some of you will, considering the majority are women on this particular webinar, maybe not, but I know in general, I get asked, why is women involvement even important? And I can tell you that women possess unique perspectives to the issues that are being faced. And that's not just from me, that's also, as you can see, from Susan Kurland, which was a former U.S. Assistant Secretary of Aviation. Diversity is an important aspect of all collaborative work because it provides this ability to really take different perspectives and pull them all together to come up with a holistic view of what the problem is, and also a holistic view on what the different mitigation measures could be to really solve these problems at hand. And if you're not aware, women think of safety and security vastly differently than men. I know personally, a lack of lighting will reduce my sense of safety. And so if I consider, as I'm considering my mode choices of where I'm going to go, I greatly consider the availability of lighting in my mode choice, mostly because I want to feel safe and secure when I'm traveling. Another aspect of that would be stroller access, where many men may not even consider the importance of stroller access. The lack of stroller access may prohibit women from going anywhere or doing anything along the lines of mode choice. So a diverse team of planners tend to produce different perspectives, and I think women probably value things like comfort and ease of use a little bit more than men. And so kind of gathering all of these different perspectives really does help to add value to everything that we're building and doing in the transportation industry. So gender equality, and more specifically gender diversity in the workforce, is the key to economic growth required for companies to win the talent war. Other quotes that I've read are diversity is the key to success, right? And so while the current workforce is combating these challenges associated with an aging population and delayed or imbalanced succession planning, it's more important than ever to ensure that we really are truly encompassing all of the qualified candidates. I'm personally witnessing major institutional knowledge loss due to the number of veteran leaders that are retiring without proper succession plans in place. In general, there's been little to no focus on strategic succession plannings in transportation, and it's more important than ever to ensure that women are considered because they are currently the largest pool of untapped labor globally. So how do we attract women to our industry? Some tips to connect with young people first. So we heard from some of the previous recommendations that you should connect young. So some tips to connect with young people is first to talk to young people. And sponsor field trips, educate school counselors about opportunities for women in engineering, because if they don't see it, then they don't see themselves in it, right? So you can't be what you don't see was a quote that I heard from one of my colleagues at PSTA, who was the Pinellas Suncoast Transit Authority, who was touting on all of the great successes that they've had in attracting and retaining women. And I really loved that quote. Another opportunity is to sponsor summer internships or semester-long apprenticeships for high school and college students. So if you attract them and give them some hands-on experience, show them that what you do really is fun and helping people, you may have a better opportunity at kind of attracting them when they're thinking of what careers they want to pursue as they move forward. And then connect with local universities to encourage students to get hands-on experience while working towards their degree. Especially with the younger generation, hands-on experience really does attract and pull more people into any industry. And transportation has so many cool things that we can really share with people, hands-on opportunities. And that'll form mutually beneficial exposure to the transportation workforce, but also to your organization. And then as those local university students graduate and move into looking for employment, you will be a familiar face, something that they're more willing to go apply. They feel more comfortable around you because they feel like they've built a relationship with you. Some more tips to connect with young people is to take advantage of social media platforms like YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. So while they can be, social media can definitely be a negative tool, it can be used for great power. And considering many of the younger generations are using social media for all of their information gathering, taking advantage of using this social media really will benefit you. Additionally, you can work with existing programs that encourage students, specifically women, to consider engineering. And there are many programs out there already. The Federal Highway Administration has the Summer Transportation Internship Program for diverse groups, the National Summer Transportation Institute Program, the Garrett A. Morgan Transportation Technology Education Program, and then the National Academy of Sciences Engineer Girl Program are all really great programs. And if you haven't heard of them, I encourage you to Google them or read the report and click on the links in there that will bring you to them to learn more. So aside from connecting with young people, networking and participating in professional organizations are another great way to attract women to our industry. Participation specifically in professional organizations includes activities like attending meetings, competing in different types of poster competitions, and socializing with peer professionals. And Additionally, if you volunteer or you run for a board or officer position, you are not only increasing the effectiveness of these networking opportunities, but you're also increasing the visibility of women as leaders. And I want to pause for a second there and just emphasize how important it is that younger women realize and see and have the ability to talk to and communicate and network with women mentors, because it helps them to envision themselves as leaders in the transportation industry as they move forward. And that simple visibility is inviting to them, not only to attract them to leadership positions within transportation, but it may also kind of stop from deterring them or from intimidating them, because the lack of diversity in general can be pretty intimidating for a young female entering the transportation profession. And so Austin mentioned in my introduction that I was selected for the Leadership ITE class, and that was an amazing program, year-long program that we went through, and we got to work on one specific project. And our project in that team was how to attract K through 12 students to the transportation sector, and so very much aligned with my personal passion and goals. But the one thing that I really got out of that program was this line of what you perceive is. And I pushed back and I said, I'm not sure that what I perceive is truly is. And our moderator, Mr. Glenn Tucker, very quickly pushed back and said, but if you perceive it, then it's true in your own mind. And he was so right. It was the way that I thought of things was more powerful than the actual truth, because it was my truth. And so many times it's that perception that drives women away from the transportation industry, such as communal goals not being emphasized in transportation. And although it's not true, it's a perception. And so I think one key aspect to help attract women to the transportation industry is to kind of change that perception, to really be deliberate in the perception that we are giving off about our industry. So let's get into these communal goals and talk about them for a moment. Men in general tend to be attracted to agentic goals, which focus on prestige and personal status. So they're more, in general, men tend to be more focused on what's in it for me, whereas women in general tend to be more attracted to communal goals, where they want to focus on helping people, on solving problems that cause challenges or that hinder others. And so oftentimes it's the drive of wanting to help others, of wanting others to feel comfortable, safe, is what drives women in general, and less focused on the personal goals. But obviously that's not true for all women, and this is very generalized. So what you have to understand is everyone's personal motivations are different. And so when personal motivations are completely understood, it's then possible to focus the type of tasks that fulfill those motives, resulting in a more satisfied team of highly motivated individuals. So there are some catches to that, is you can't assume that you understand what someone's motives are. So you should ask them. Just because I'm a female doesn't mean that I am only motivated by helping others. And the only way that you will know any different is if you ask me. However, there's still a bit of a catch in that not everyone knows exactly what motivates them. And so one way of getting around this is to provide a range of tasks to determine true motivations and see where each person shines, right? And so as you can see what they like to do best, where they shine the most, where they're the most passionate, and then you can focus as much as possible the tasks for them focused on their true motivations. And then lastly on this slide, it's important to understand also that motives change over time. So just because you understand one's motives when you hired them, that doesn't mean you understand their motives 10 years down the line. So these are kind of conversations that you may want to consider bringing into or providing range of tasks as you move forward throughout their career to ensure that you're still giving them an opportunity to change their mind on their motives as they move forward in your organization. So how do we convince women that transportation does touch on all of these communal goals that they really want to highlight? Well, anyone that currently works in the transportation industry understands that undeniable connection with communal goals. It's necessary to alter the perception of the industry to match the reality. So if we can focus our perception of the transportation industry on the ways that we improve sustainability, the ways that transportation improves food availability, the way that transportation supplements medical innovations, the mobility options to improve the quality of life for the underserved populations. All of these things together really do highlight communal goal congruity. And it's really just a matter of us as the transportation industry, as engineers and planners and designers, to really emphasize that these goals are out there and that this is what our day-to-day tasks are ultimately solving. So in one experiment, women who learned that a scientist spent the day working with others as opposed to working alone, they exhibited particularly strong increases in their attitudes towards science careers. And I can completely understand where that perception comes from because I am a social butterfly. And if I thought that working in transportation as a transportation engineer meant that I would sit in an office by myself and not talk to anyone, there's no way I would have ever focused my career in transportation engineering. But as shown in the picture here, transportation engineers get to do all kinds of cool stuff. And this is a group photo of several of us that got to go tour some facilities in Colorado where they were training firefighters on how to fight these different rail fires. And you can see in that very diverse group that there are women and men from all backgrounds and ages, and our industry really is a great fun industry to work in. Continuing on this communal goal congruity, there are ways that as you highlight the goal congruity process that contribute to transportation engineering decisions, you can attract the most talented individuals, and this is regardless of gender, like I mentioned earlier. We're not really focused on just attracting women. We're focused on attracting the best talent to our industry. We just know that women are currently the largest untapped pool of that talent. And if you complement lessons about STEM concepts and skills with specific ways and hands-on projects, then you can improve the quality of lives or save lives, and that can have a great benefit for students. And then after lessons that show STEM's communal possibilities with that classroom activities, you should encourage students to then apply that what they've learned from those materials, from those classes to their lives to further increase that motivation and learning. So there was a pan-organizational summit from science engineering workforce held by the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine in 2003. And that revealed that most turnover problems were related to the absence of adequate mentorship, ambiguity of the promotion process, and other minority neglecting decision making. So in order to effectively increase the diversity of the workforce of the transportation industry, it's important to consider not only the key aspects that are required to attract women to the industry, but also key aspects that are necessary to promote and retain women once they're in the field. So these clear paths to promotion really are a necessary fundamental cornerstone to ensure that talent is retained and that women aren't subject to the good old boy succession plans where they're not included. So Jessica Jung, who is the Director of Corporate Social Responsibility of Bombardier Transportation, was quoted in a 2015 forum saying, in order to increase the number of women in a male-dominated transportation industry, it's crucial to set specific targets, develop roadmaps to reach these targets, and implement regular monitoring. So we need to really set these goals to attract a diverse workforce, but once the goals are set, we need to make sure that we are sticking to those goals and that there's accountability if the goals aren't adhered to. Because that's really an imperative component to successfully attracting and retaining women once we do attract them to the transportation industry. Other research reinforces the notion that women who have female mentors and role models are more likely to remain in the engineering industry. So, for example, a multi-year longitudinal study that followed 150 incoming female students majoring in engineering at a public university showed that women who received mentoring and guidance from other successful women in the industry were more likely to remain in engineer-related positions upon graduation and throughout their careers. Women that received no mentoring, which was the control group, and women who were paired with male mentors both showed steep declines in feelings of belonging in engineering from the beginning to the end of their first year. And alternatively, women with female mentors reported a more stable feeling of belonging. And so I think a lot of that goes back to the being able to see yourself in your mentors. And so that presence of the role models and mentors really is an important factor, especially for women and especially even more so for cultural minorities who choose these non-traditional careers. So once we attract women to our industry, it's really important that we retain the quality talent. And I personally know of more than one woman who have left the field, left engineering, left transportation, the transportation industry in general, after they had their first child. And to be frank, parenthood affects motivations. And I understand that. And there is likely there are likely going to be some times when women do have children and they decide they no longer wanted to work and that their motivations are completely changed. However, I don't think that that's the reason that many women leave STEM fields and transportation in general. I think that the majority of them are leaving because of lack of flexible schedules or lack of policies that allow them to take time off. So about 24% of mothers of preschoolers are opting out of the production, transportation, and material moving labor force, and this was from a report from 2009. And they at least partly attribute that to cultures that are not family friendly. So you can improve those retention rates of these professional parents, and this is not just mothers, but fathers as well, by offering flexible schedules, generous maternity and paternity leave policies, opportunities for advancement, and help with childcare. And I'll touch on the maternity and paternity leave policies, not just being policies, but being policies that are actually put into practice. So if you have a maternity policy that allows one to take, let's say, 4 weeks off, but if they take that 4 weeks off, they're going to lose their projects and not have anything to work on when they come back, then that's really not something in practice, it's just something on paper. And so these policies really do need to be held to an accountability standard. So moving into some future research considerations, I want to make sure that I leave plenty of time for question and answer at the end. Some of the future research that I suggested after reading all of these different reports and articles was that research could really benefit from focusing on successful balancing practices both for women and for organizations. That includes actual examples of policies that can be implemented to encourage healthy work-life balance. And I think that these specific examples of policies could be mutually beneficial both for the women and for the organizations because you'll attract more qualified candidates and they'll be happier when they're working for you. And then finally, to develop training related to cultural change as beneficial guidance for all employment levels to ensure that diversity inclusion is prevalent organization-wide. So it's really important that diversity is not promoted just from the bottom, but it really does need to be an organization-wide effort to ensure that true diversity is the perception that you are giving off. And so I have one slide of conclusions, and then we will get into, I have about 11 recommendations that came from the report. So effective change in organizational culture is dependent upon the holistic development, implementation, and enforcement of diversity promoting policies. The culture and the perception of the culture of an organization is the most important consideration when focusing on attracting a diverse, talented workforce. So it's not just the culture, but the perception of that culture. So for instance, if we go back to kind of the social media aspect, if you are promoting, let's say, your organization using photos of presentations that were given by colleagues within your organization, it's important to make sure that those postings, the social media outreach, is diverse and that you're not showing the same picture of one person always giving presentations or always traveling. It's really important that what you're putting out there in social media is deliberate and deliberate in the diversity, so that you're not just promoting one type of person. You're not just promoting a white male, or you're not just promoting, even just females also would not, in my mind, be the perception that you would want to give off. You really do want to focus on that true diversity. And the promotion and retention of women in the transportation industry really is multifaceted and requires a holistic approach and dedication from all levels of employment. So moving directly into recommendation 1. The first recommendation is to connect with young people to promote the industry as a desirable career option. Do this through mentorship. Provide opportunities for others in the industry to mentor as well. Encourage your friends to be mentors. Encourage them to volunteer. Encourage them to reach out to others and to talk to the younger generation, because just building those relationships, just by saying hello, you may not realize the perception that you're giving off, but you really could be making our industry more desirable. And the benefits of sharing success stories and providing advice and guidance and prompt answers to mentees cannot be overstated. So having that ability, that contact, that feedback, and the success stories that I find women aren't so willing to share. It's almost like we feel like we're bragging if we share our own personal success stories, and it feels a little awkward. It does for me as well. But it really is important because it shows others that success is a possibility as we're moving forward. The second recommendation is to encourage participation in professional organizations, especially leadership participation and networking event attendance. Encourage participation in extracurricular activities, because this provides opportunities to improve confidence and increase the visibility in the industry. And that visibility, as I mentioned earlier, is mutually beneficial not only for the young professional, but also for the organization. And building these relationships through these professional organizations and networking opportunities really does provide you with that opportunity to have kind of insight into who the best and the brightest are that are entering the profession. So the third recommendation is to promote educational and career opportunities, focusing especially on minority recruitment efforts. If you encourage the support of minority-focused scholarships, internships, and awards to increase the recruiting the talent pool so that minorities are afforded the opportunities that they wouldn't otherwise have, you are thus increasing the talent pool that's being attracted to our industry. And the educational promotion may require changes in educational tools or traditional information delivery methods in order to ensure that there's a focus on the skills that are needed in the industry. And specifically, I'm talking about the soft skills like public speaking, which could easily be incorporated into different curricula without jeopardizing accreditation requirements. The fourth recommendation is to create a gender-balanced panel for all final decisions pertaining to hiring. And I would also include this in promoting panel, in a panel for promoting decisions as well. Presenting a gender-balanced hiring panel is one way to show immediate dedication to diversity while also ensuring that the hiring decisions are not biased, which is really important if you want to attract a diverse workforce. The fifth recommendation that came out of the report is to intentionally promote your desired perceptions. Deliberately advertising your agency's support of diversity through as many outreach opportunities as possible, including professional organizations and association meetings, social media, newsletter, and magazine articles. This will help to promote the perception that's desired rather than allowing others, outsiders, to define your public perception. Because if you don't promote the perception that you want out there, others will come up with their own perception of your organization, and you really have no control over that. So you really should be intentional about the way that you are promoting the perception of your organization. Along those lines, the sixth recommendation is to promote the communal goal congruity of as I mentioned earlier, I said here public transit, and that's because that's kind of where my heart is near and dear. So many bus operators, safety supervisors, engineers, planners, policymakers, researchers, they're all fulfilling these personal communal goals throughout our careers. And I know that many of you in other transportation industry organizations are doing the same. And if we can highlight the ways that transportation really does promote this communal goal congruity, then we will be much more successful at attracting others that have those communal goals. Recommendation 7 is to develop and adhere to a defined succession plan to ensure there's no bias in promotion decisions. So with clear promotion guidance that's inclusive of specific requirements for advancement, it leaves no room for unintentional bias in the promotion process within your agency. Because again, not seeing that path up is a common reason provided by women who left the transportation industry. So if they don't see a path up, they're going to see a path out. And it's up to us as transportation professionals within our industry to make sure that there is that clear promotion guidance available and to reduce that bias. The 8th recommendation is to invest in best practices syntheses that collect and compare public transportation agency policies and implementation successes to develop and promote a toolbox of applicable guidance. So there's no need to reinvent the wheel. If others have policies that have been successful, that have worked, then those agencies, organizations really should share those policies with others within the industry to allow many to benefit from that guidance. The 9th recommendation is to conduct or participate in recurring surveys to understand the effectiveness of the cultural diversity efforts in place. Sharing practices that were ineffective are just as important as sharing the practices that were effective. And so it's really important that you're gathering this feedback, that you're communicating with your employees to ensure that what you're doing is working. Moving into the 10th recommendation, ensure policies allow employees to take earned time off without fear of retribution or loss of work availability upon return. Policies that are family-friendly and allow for time off after childbirth and other dependent care considerate policies will all contribute to retention rates of qualified talent. And again, this can't just be a policy, it has to be actually applicable. Finally, the last recommendation is that change must occur at every level of an organization in order to be effective. And so the buy-in must occur from the CEO all the way down to the frontline employees to ensure that effective cultural improvement. And so lastly, just promote each other's successes. And so on that note, this work has led to so many different opportunities that I've had, that I've been exposed to so many different organizations. Ellen Voya from Women in Trucking emailed me, and we had some conversations and subsequent interviews where she talked about really some of these successes that have happened in the trucking industry and applied many of these recommendations to the trucking industry successfully. McKinsey and Company is an international organization that really has promoted and highlighted attracting and retaining women in general. The Pinellas Suncoast Transit Authority and Bay Area Rapid Transit in California, they have both been done amazing jobs at implementing some of these strategies and implementing different programs. And they agreed with many of the recommendations from the report and have found those recommendations to lead to a successful improvement in diversity within their organization. So with that, I will conclude, and I have, it looks like, a little over 9 minutes for some questions, so I will let Austin take over with those.
Thank you so much, Jody. I'll take it before Austin does. As a reminder, you have the Q&A box, which is located in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. If you have any questions, simply type them into that box, and we'll put them into the queue. And then I will now hand it over to Austin, who will work her way through the questions. Austin?
Great, thanks. Yeah, we've had a lot of great questions come in, so we'll certainly try to get through as many as we can. But for any questions that we do not have time to address, we'll be sure to send those over to Jody, and the webinar recording will include those responses. So Jody, this question kind of goes back to that early outreach and intervention point. Have you identified kind of the optimal age group to be targeted for outreach?
So in general, I say as young as you can. I do the Great American Teach-In every year, and I always volunteer for a kindergarten class and then whatever class my son is in. So I really enjoy the kindergartners because they're so full of energy and they're so willing to kind of attach onto anything. So from my perspective, I think the younger the better. And then if you can go back every year and kind of reinforce that passion, then I think that would be the best way. Optimal age of actually attracting someone into our field, I would imagine, is probably high school area, because that's about when I started deciding what I wanted to be when I grew up.
Sure. So we have another question. The transit industry as a whole is not one that most individuals are aware of. That applies maybe to both male and female. Jody, what would you recommend to broaden the visibility in general of the transportation industry?
So I think providing any kind of hand-on opportunity, especially to the younger groups, really does broaden that visibility of the transportation industry. I think that many let's say high school kids don't quite consider transit as an option. I'll say I didn't. I kind of fell into it, but I'm very grateful for it. And so I think the more hands-on opportunities that you have, the better.
Great. So I'm not sure if the data that you looked at actually got this granular, but did you happen to find higher rates of women working in transportation field in geographic areas that have mass transit, so I guess the larger urban areas?
Yeah, so unfortunately the ACS data, the American Community Survey data, is a very small sample of about 1.2% of all households. So as you start to dig into some of the geographical differences by sex, by occupation, it becomes not statistically significant or unavailable. So currently, I have not looked into that.
Sure. Well, I guess it's kind of along those same lines. Did you happen to find differences in women's recruitment and retention within some of the sub-industries of transportation. We've had several comments about the presence of urban planning, for example, in the transportation industry. And one of our participants noted that, there does seem to be higher rates of women in planning, business development, marketing versus kind of the engineering or technician-oriented jobs. So I'm not sure if maybe you could talk to that.
So I will say, I took many urban planning courses, and that was the first thing I noticed that was different than the engineering courses that I took, is that I was no longer a minority. So in general, I found urban planners do tend to be more female, and I think that a lot of that goes to the obvious ways that the communal goal congruity really does play a role in urban planning. I don't think that the ACS considers urban planners part of the transportation industry. I'm not exactly sure where they would fall into that. I'm going to leave myself a note on where they should on where they're placed in that categorization. But I definitely know that urban planners tend to attract more females than let's say public transit, for instance.
Okay. So we did have a comment from one of our participants who noted that in his or her experience, having a gender-balanced panel really is critical, and they've noticed that the hiring process has really changed significantly over the past couple of years. And Jody, I wasn't sure if you just had anything to add to that comment to kind of stress the importance of that gender-balanced panel.
Yeah, so it's been a few years now since I graduated and was looking for a job, but as I was interviewing, that was really one of the big factors in deciding which organization I was going to choose to be employed at, was the diversity, not only that I was able to see, but on the hiring panel. And I felt that if no women were represented anywhere within the C-suite, that just was not an acceptable organization in general. But I found that to not be the case, at least locally here. I think that we do better than some areas in general, but we are definitely still lacking. But yes, I agree that gender balanced panel really is critical to promote, to attract them to the organization to begin with, to actually having them choose your organization to work for, and then in retaining them as well.
Great, thank you. And I guess on that note too, have you analyzed gender balance in panels at industry conferences? Or maybe you can just talk a little bit in your experience at different industry conferences, how you've seen that maybe change over the past few years, or not.
So I have been so blessed. ITE, the Institute of Transportation Engineers, really has been kind of my home networking organization in general. And ITE is full of amazing, powerful, awesome, influential women who have mentored me all the way through. And they made it very obvious, very clear that women belonged in this organization. And I felt that having that sense of belonging, being able to see them as leaders within these organizations, that really helped to encourage me and know that I'm in the right field and that I'm in the right organizations and that I'm in networking and in the right places and with the right people. So I felt that real sense of belonging. And so I think that that's really what I've noticed, is being able to feel like you belong in one of these organizations will encourage you to come back more, right? So I've been exceptionally blessed with ITE, but I also have noticed other organizations, which I won't name, where I sit and I may be one of 2 females in a room of 90. And I'm okay with that, because I have now kind of earned my wings, I feel like, but I can definitely understand how that would be intimidating to some new young women coming into this industry.
Great, thank you. Well, I think that is a great spot to stop at, and I just want to give Jody a final thank you for a very informative and engaging presentation and for the great questions from our audience. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this back over to Stephanie for a few closing remarks.
Thank you again, Jody and Austin, so much for the great, thoughtful, and conversation-focused presentation. I did open up the evaluation for you. If you did not see it, simply click on the evaluation link in the link section and then hit browse to. I did realize that there are still a number of questions that are available in the Q&A box. We will download those questions and send those questions over to Jody, and under the Cutter, on the Cutter website, under the recording, we will post her responses to the questions that are still in the queue. We do have another great Cutter Transportation webcast scheduled in 2 weeks from today, August 1st, 2019, with two researchers from the University of Buffalo discussing their paper that was published in the Journal of Public Transportation on how transit agencies implement best practice strategies in complementary ADA paratransit eligibility. Again, thank you so much for attending today's Cutter Transportation webcast, and we will see you again in 2 weeks.